It's 5:04 and welcome into a Tuesday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour on News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. Well, we are living under a new administration this morning. It was Inauguration Day yesterday in Washington, D.C., and at 12:01 yesterday, Donald Trump became the 47th president of the United States, declaring the golden age of America beginning then. North Carolina's Senators Thom Tillis and Ted Budd took to social media to recognize the occasion. Trump gave about a 30-minute inaugural address at the Capitol Rotunda. We talked about the plans changing yesterday due to icy and frigid temperatures in Washington, D.C. And just a few minutes into his speech, well, the president gave us some comments about North Carolina. Take a listen.
Our country can no longer deliver basic services in times of emergency, as recently shown by the wonderful people of North Carolina, been treated so badly. And other states who are still suffering from a hurricane that took place many months ago.
That's the president referring to Hurricane Helene victims in western North Carolina. We have documented in extensive detail over the last couple of months the issues with both the federal government, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and the continued recovery and relief efforts, talking about how the country can no longer deliver those basic services in regards to getting those folks relief and the help that they need to get back to some semblance of normalcy after that storm affected portions of the western half of the state in September of this year. We'll have more coverage on the inauguration coming up here in just a few minutes. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour, News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. Ahead of the inauguration over the weekend, many folks from North Carolina making their way to Washington, D.C. to take part in all of the inauguration festivities. One of them was the North Carolina Society inaugural ball. I had the pleasure to attend. To discuss more about that this morning, Donna King from the Carolina Journal joins us this morning. Donna, the North Carolina Society, what exactly is that group? What do they do?
Well, I mean, it's kind of an expat group, for lack of a better term, but it's really about people who have those deep connections to North Carolina but live in the Washington, D.C. area, and they have been brought together in this organization for all kinds of activities and events, watch parties, and to really celebrate North Carolina's contribution to the national stage there in Washington, D.C. And this ball, I think, is really one of the oldest of its kind, is held every year on the inauguration. This year, of course, just beautiful. I'm so glad you got a chance to go, because it really was the people from North Carolina who are making a really big difference at the national stage. A congressional delegation was there, certainly lots of activity going on. The Governor Stein on the guest list there, and it's a nonpartisan group. So you had Republicans and Democrats coming together to really recognize the peaceful transfer of power. And of course, a North Carolina band there, lots of good, beach music, lots of good food going on. I'm glad you got a chance to really experience it. Tell me what you saw, because it looked like it was a lot of fun.
It was. It was a really cool event and a really cool opportunity to attend. Looking at the event as a whole, obviously it was packed with individuals. Inauguration weekend, many folks' plans changing as we headed into Monday due to the weather. But North Carolina is super prominent on the national stage. We talked about last week Virginia Foxx now leading the Rules Committee. You have Michael Whatley, the former head of the NCGOP, now running the RNC. Trump's daughter-in-law was the co-chair of the RNC for a period of time. Senator Ted Budd and Thom Tillis leading at the national stage, big-time positions in the U.S. Senate. It seems like down in North Carolina is like the precipice of politics, and that was in full attendance. I saw Senator Budd and both Tillis were at the event. Former House Speaker, now Congressman Tim Moore, was also in attendance as well. Had the opportunity to chat with him for a couple of minutes in a side conversation. I said, Tim, is it a little weird being up in Washington, D.C.? And he didn't say it was weird. He said, but it's a completely different animal going from Speaker of the House in North Carolina to a member of Congress, that it is a completely different animal that he's dealing with. Michael Whatley stopped by, the RNC chairman. Really, really cool event, and a lot of folks, even folks without North Carolina ties, which is what I found rather interesting as you were chatting with individuals mingling around the room. plenty of folks had absolutely no North Carolina ties or connections, yet they went out and purchased tickets to go to this event, obviously going back to the fact that they throw a pretty good party over at the North Carolina Society.
Yeah, no kidding, of course. Well, tell me about the mood, though, because this is what I'm seeing, and I'm sure you were seeing the same thing. I feel like there is a renewed sense of optimism, and I don't know if that's just North Carolina or it's really making its way into the Capitol.
I think it's all over the place. Our Uber driver to the Society Gala dinner on Saturday night was actually an individual from South Korea. And while we didn't get into a full-throated political conversation, obviously I'm sure most of the drives that he's been doing over the last few days were folks politically related with so much activity in D.C., but even he was kind of hinting at some of this renewed optimism that you're talking about. We saw this echoed by the president yesterday during his inauguration address. Don, I think people are just so overly frustrated with what they were seeing, whether they were turning on the news, opening up Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. It just seemed like that America was constantly on the low, whether it was issues with the economy, crime, inflation, the border, all over the place. It just felt like America was always kind of on a back foot. And with the election of Trump and with him being inaugurated yesterday, it seems like that level of enthusiasm is the fact that what Trump continues to say, America is back and that we're going to make America great again. That was his final words in the Capitol Rotunda yesterday, and that sentiment seemed to be echoed by a lot of people at the Society Ball on Saturday night.
Sure. And also you have to look at North Carolina is, first in flight, first in freedom. There's really some policy innovations that come out of the Tar Heel State here because we've got such a strong banking, such strong research, science, but policy as well. And you can really see that the way North Carolina's budget has been working for the last 12 years and taking some of those lessons to the U.S. Capitol, you really can feed that innovation. And that's not even a partisan issue. The North Carolina Society is a nonpartisan organization. You see people from, Democrats, Republicans, everything in between, taking that policy innovation to the national stage. Question is it landing? What is your thought when you were listening to some of those conversations as you were there and people are looking forward to the future? Do you think the message has gotten there about, reducing spending, smaller government?
I think so, and I'll use the analogy of what Michael Whatley did as the NC GOP chairman. Great successes in the state running the Republican Party. What was the result? Sucked up to the RNC at Washington, D.C., and taking over that entire organization. Most of our congressional delegation has had most of them have been in the House or the Senate at one form or another. Obviously, former House Speaker Tim Moore, who I was mentioning, a freshman in Congress now. So I would hope, and it seems to be the case, that some of the successes that we've had in North Carolina, we always talk about trickle down. Maybe some of this stuff is trickling up to Washington, D.C., where they can take some of those policy wins like you were mentioning and some of the good governance that we've seen over the last decade and translate that into successes and wins up at Washington, D.C.
Sure. Well, that's what we have to see. We have to see states as incubators of good policy, because the general philosophy, certainly among Republicans, is that what really happens impactfully needs to happen closest to communities. And some of those best practices will make their way. Look at Virginia Foxx as a perfect example. You mentioned that she's going to be rules chairman. That philosophy of management, keeping things tight, keeping, budgets low, and, only moving the legislation that absolutely has to get through, making government small and impactful, is a philosophy that hopefully we will see in the next Congress. It's going to be tough, though. It really is. It is a behemoth ship to try and turn around after 4 years.
Yeah, there's no question about it. We'll, of course, keep a close eye on that over the coming weeks and months, and you can actually read more about this North Carolina Society Ball by visiting our website this morning, carolinajournal.com. Donna King joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:13, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT, dealing with some early morning issues on the roadways. Let's get a look at traffic with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you.
It's 5:20. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. We are streaming live on our Carolina Journal YouTube channel this morning. Also encourage you to check out the podcast wherever you get your shows. Just search for the Carolina Journal News Hour, tap the subscribe or follow button, and take the show with you on demand on your own time. It's the Carolina Journal News Hour podcast. Download and subscribe now. Well, the state of North Carolina and most of the Southeast is probably more accurate to say is set to be dealing with a major cold snap over the next couple of days. Some icy and snowy conditions in the southeastern portion of the state. And with that, crews from Duke Energy are in preparation to make sure that they are all prepared as they anticipate a major increase in usage. Crews are prepared to keep the lights on. Jeff Brooks, who is a spokesperson with Duke Energy, says we know electricity is not just a convenience on a cold day. It's an essential service, and we're going to do everything we can to provide services. In some areas of the state, they are seeing the coldest temperatures in nearly 2 years. And with that, Brooks says that Duke Energy has made several improvements, including cold weather predictions on power plants and new ways to manage energy usage across the system. He said, quote, "Our crews have been working to make sure our power plants are ready to deliver the power that our customers need. Our crews are out in the field and ready to respond to any interruptions that we see and to make sure that we can serve our customers effectively." Brooks says Duke Energy is encouraging users, however, to lower their thermostats just a couple of degrees to help limit any overloading of the system. In addition, he provided the following tips to keep your house warm. Ensure you have a clean air filter. Open the blinds on the sunny side of the house, of course, during the day when the sun is shining in. Let the natural warmth from the sun help you save on your home's heating cost. Use a ceiling fan to circulate warm air if you're running something like a space heater. And make sure loads of laundry are full and use just cold water when you're washing that. Some frigid temperatures expected from the mountains to the coast. With that, you've got DOT crews that are also brining roads in some areas of the state this morning as well due to some of those snowy conditions. And where snow is not expected, the concern and the fear is that rain that was expected to fall could immediately turn into black ice in the overnight hours. So it could be a couple of messy days on the roads coming up. We'll keep an eye on it right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 5:23. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. 45 is now 47. A busy day in Washington, D.C. yesterday to get reaction from the inauguration of the 47th President of the United States at the Capitol Rotunda. Donna King, editor-in-chief over at CarolinaJournal.com, joins us on the News Hour this morning. Donna, a very busy day in D.C. yesterday. Different plans, unfortunately, due to Mother Nature and some chilly conditions up in the D.C. metro area. Give us your overall broad view of what you heard yesterday from now President Donald Trump.
Sure. When it was first announced that they would have to move everything into the Rotunda and into the Capital One Arena, I think there was kind of a sense of disappointment. But I got to tell you, it really was a remarkable afternoon for the 47th president for his inauguration, because I feel like we got kind of an inside look at how this works, things that we would not normally have seen. We saw all the cast of characters coming and going in and out of the Capitol. We saw his cabinet nominees coming and going, plus that sort of undercurrent of political drama was right there on display, much more than it would have been had it been out in front of the Capitol. And I think people got kind of a firsthand look at how this works. This was the first time since 1985, I believe, that this was moved inside and that was 1985 being Ronald Reagan. I really saw some connections between the Reagan inauguration and this one. Being a Reagan kid at the time, I'm really feeling kind of a mood, a sense that things are going to be moving toward a promise, a golden age, as Trump said yesterday in his inaugural address. But I really also noticed the emphasis he placed on North Carolina. It really played a key part in his reelection, and it really is becoming more and more prominent, particularly for this administration.
Yeah, touching on the North Carolina bit, and it was just a couple of minutes into his inauguration address when he hammered the federal government for what he described as the simple task of helping people in Western North Carolina. He claims that the federal government failed that, and essentially gave a wink and a nod to those people that this new administration, this incoming federal government, is not going to have that same response.
Absolutely. We saw on Twitter actually that just, the day before he was sworn in, that there was a notice, FEMA put a notice out that they were going to make a much more conservative effort to get temporary housing available, trailers, things like that, out to Western North Carolina. Now, that process was already moving, was already in place, but I do think that the sort of symbolism of that word coming just as he's being inaugurated was a message to folks who were particularly the ones who were supporting him in parts of North Carolina, that he was going to get things moving along, that we weren't going to have the bureaucracy that's been slowing the process down, because it has been, whether in the teens and lower for Western North Carolina, very difficult situation, living conditions for people out there. But I think the overall sense from yesterday is that someone is driving the bus, and perhaps it felt like before no one was.
There's no question about that. Before we get back into the inauguration, you kind of mentioned some of these political undercurrents that were flowing. Even on his way out, a busy day for Joe Biden, signing 2 sets of pardons, one earlier in the day yesterday, dealing with some members of the federal government, then seemingly pardoning his entire family, Donna, literally minutes before Trump is set to be sworn in. It's kind of the sense to show you that at the end of the day, politics is still politics.
Sure. So the pardons that you're talking about first were on Monday. He issued pardons for people like Dr. Fauci and folks that were the investigative committee of January 6th. Those people that he said very clearly in his pardon that this wasn't because there was some sort of admission of guilt, that he was afraid of political retribution from the incoming Trump administration. And then, of course, today, just minutes before the swearing in, he pardoned his own brother, his in-laws, for any action that could be seen to be against any nonviolent action against the United States dating back to January 1st of 2014. So that sort of preemptive or retroactive pardon, that's kind of new territory. And so we're hearing a lot from lawyers that say, I don't know if that's going to stand up, because certainly when Trump was leaving, Democrats on the Hill were saying, well, we wouldn't, and Liz Cheney saying, well, we won't accept preemptive pardons, and that won't stand legal muster. So the question is would they in this case, or will it just keep right on moving as part of political theater?
Back to the inauguration, we're joined this morning by Donna King over at CarolinaJournal.com. You mentioned this kind of golden era, and you harpen back to the Reagan years. Trump's comments seem to be at least laser focused on some of his major campaign issues. Donna, we looked at a bunch of Carolina Journal polls ahead of the election cycle and even post-election cycle. He seemed to really hit the nail on the head on all of these major issues in some form or another that were presumably the driving factor that not only secured him 7 out of 7 swing state victories in November, but gave him the popular vote, which doesn't typically happen for a Republican president. He seems focused on it.
Absolutely. And it sounds like he's really putting, his word to paper right now, because just after the swearing in, signs upwards of 200 executive orders at a desk right there on the stage in the Capital One Arena. Among them, things like barring censorship from the government and declaring a state of emergency at the southern border, declaring an energy state of emergency. All of these things that were core tenets of his campaign promises on the campaign trail, putting them into executive orders. It is interesting. Many of those executive orders are undoing executive orders of the Biden administration, things like the electrical vehicle mandate. But in many of these, he really is going to have to work with Congress, which has, of course, a very slim majority there in the House. But he's going to have to work with Congress to get some of these through. Among them, for example, a bill that was filed last week to repurchase the Panama Canal. That came up in his comments. So it's really going to be a combination of reaching across the aisle and working with the existing Republican majority, in combination with some of these executive orders, declaring drug cartels enemies of the state or of terrorist organizations. Things like that are going to be part of his effort to make those campaign promises real.
We'll continue the conversation with Donna King coming up after this. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:30, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Let's get another look at traffic on this Tuesday morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank
It's 5:36. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. Good Tuesday morning to you. We've got some sad news this morning coming out of the North Carolina General Assembly. Representative Joe John, who is a Wake County Democrat, announced his resignation from the state legislature yesterday, writing that he has exhausted all of his treatment options in his continued battle with cancer. John, who is 85, was first elected back in 2016 and reelected to a fifth term to the General Assembly in November. He represents a northwestern area of Wake County. That's the district he serves. John, a lawyer who was a state superior court candidate, a state district judge, a judge in the North Carolina Court of Appeals, and the director of the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, has been involved in ongoings in the state for quite some time. He wrote in the letter released yesterday, quote, "This decision, though incredibly difficult, is made with the intention of focusing on my health and spending cherished time with my family during this challenging period." We also got some reaction in from House Leader Robert Reeves saying, "Our thoughts are with Representative Joe John and his family as he steps back from public office. Representative John has been a lifelong public servant, serving as a judge for decades, as the director of our SBI, and most recently as a member of the North Carolina House of Representatives. Our caucus and our state is lucky to have him." Wake County Democrats will choose John's replacement at his effect as his resignation is effective immediately. While he asks individual for some privacy during this time, he does welcome texts, emails, and messages on his Facebook page, which is Joe John NC House 40. You can read his entire letter over there. Some sad news to pass along this morning here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. 538 News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. Continuing our conversation this morning with the editor-in-chief of CarolinaJournal.com, Donna King, about a busy day in the Capitol Rotunda as the 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, was officially sworn in. Donna, I'm sure pretty much everybody listened, or at least listened to some parts of what the president had to say yesterday. It was a thread during Joe Biden's inauguration, and pretty much every president going back the last 20 years. Unity and bringing the country together. They all say it. It's a lot harder to do. How do you think that kind of shakes out over the next couple of years?
Well, I think it's encouraging first that a poll taken just a few days ago before the swearing in by CBS and YouGov shows that about 59% of Americans, regardless of party, approve of how the Trump-Vance transition team has been operating. And about 51 to 52% are either satisfied or very satisfied with him having won in November. And I think that says a lot. He's coming in with a very clear support and some optimism in the country, much more so than we saw in 2020 and 2016. So I think that one, starting off on the right foot. I think that people feel so burned by the last 4 years on both sides of the aisle that they're ready to try something new and give this a chance. I think that that's an opportunity for the Trump administration to really capitalize on it, to be very measured with their words and their actions, and to really show a position of strength coming into the White House, something that a lot of folks have felt was sorely needed right now on Pennsylvania Avenue, but also the opportunity to work with Congress. This is where he has an opportunity to really excel and strike those deals. We saw him bring in real estate colleagues from New York to help strike deals for the release of Israeli hostages, tapping into the resources that he has and making this wide list, this large list of priorities, policy priorities, a reality, things that some people are saying are just not even possible, proving that they will really restore faith in the process.
One of these issues, and there are plenty that Trump is going to be facing in his first couple hundred days, one of them, Donna, that could affect upwards of 200 million Americans, continues to be this saga over the Chinese-owned app TikTok. Talked about it yesterday morning, some back and forth. The Supreme Court ruled on Friday that, in fact, the U.S. government could uphold a ban. The app was down for 14, 15 hours. Then we learned that the incoming administration before the inauguration had given ByteDance some concessions and some more time. While I'm not a TikTok user, I will be the first to admit that 170 plus million Americans are. It's a big deal. How do you think this kind of unfolds over the next 60, 90 days?
Well, I mean, I will say that this was extremely powerful for the incoming Trump administration among the, say, 15 to 25-year-old set in the United States. When TikTok went down for whatever it was, 12 or 14 hours, my own kids were texting back and forth furiously. It's the end of the world. It's worse than COVID. I'm in mourning. What will happen to my life? Like, they love TikTok. And you saw a lot of them already start to move over to Red Note and Lemonade, which are also Chinese owned products with questionable security measures in it. I mean, what this showed us just in this short period of time is, one, he knows how to quickly reach that demographic. But two, this is going to be a game of whack-a-mole. Eliminating TikTok is not going to solve the problem. Another product and another product and another product will just pop up, and they're going to have to be tackling each one. Finding some sort of deal, some sort of way to make this work is going to be an important part of what the Trump administration will tackle in these first days. That said, it's still the law. So what we're finding now is the Trump administration has got to work with Congress to figure out, okay, if I stop this, if I have whatever he said, 50% American ownership in it, he's still going to it probably will have to be litigated. Those kind of things, because the ban is still the law, that unless TikTok divests from Chinese ownership, Chinese government connections, that it has to be banned in the United States.
There's kind of two parallel tracks with this. One is the ownership, obviously the threats and concerns over data and privacy with the Chinese government, which has a large share in ByteDance, TikTok's parent company. And then the other is a lawsuit that we saw here in North Carolina throughout the latter parts of last year and was echoed in many other states, is, Donna, irregardless of the ownership, the algorithms, the content, the things that you are served as a user of, in this case, TikTok, but you could make the same argument about Instagram, Facebook, and other apps, is harmful to children. I feel like both of these things are going to have to be litigated kind of separately.
I mean, they could be. I think one of the important things that he did say in this inaugural address is that he's going to end government censorship of free speech. And this is a perfect test of that right out of the gate. And that is the question, because their parents play a role in this. And certainly when adults are using it, there can be harmful content, certainly, but that is a consumer beware situation, or parents to be more aware of what their kids are involved in. This is going to be a very difficult needle for the Trump administration to thread. Is the U.S. government going to own part of that? Because that's what it sounds like he said. Or is it going to go on the block for something like Elon Musk to buy a majority stakeholder in it? So this is going to be difficult, and 50% isn't going to cut it. 51% might. But then what do you do with these other products that might be coming online as time goes through? So this is going to be a real challenge, and really, exploring some new territory for digital technology, privacy, and free speech.
Donna, we've got coverage on both the inauguration and that TikTok story. Where do folks check out the latest on that?
Absolutely. Head over to carolinajournal.com. We'll be covering everything going on, certainly in the next 4 years and for much longer.
Donna King joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. It's now 5:44, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Another look at traffic this Tuesday morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thanks.
Good morning again. It's 5:51. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour. I'm on News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT as we continue our coverage of Inauguration Day 2025. Yesterday, we heard from now the 47th President of the United States and Donald Trump about some hurricane relief in western North Carolina.
Our country can no longer deliver basic services in times of emergency, as recently shown by the wonderful people of North Carolina, been treated so badly. And other states who are still suffering from a hurricane that took place many months ago.
That's President Trump yesterday in the Capitol Rotunda talking about individuals being treated poorly, commenting on government being unable to provide some of the basic needs. And with that, we've got an update this morning on the ongoing criticism of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. We covered last week how Governor Josh Stein had sent a letter to FEMA requesting a 6-month extension of their Transitional Shelter Assistance Program, TSA as it's known. And we got a letter yesterday from FEMA commenting on this in a response to Governor Stein. It reads as in follows. This is a response to your January the 16th request to FEMA Administrator Criswell to extend the Transitional Shelter Assistance Program eligibility period for an additional 6 months through September the 30th, 2025 for eligible North Carolinians. That request indicated more time is needed for the program because the homes of families affected by Hurricane Helene require long-term rebuilding and it will not be safe for some time. Pursuant to FEMA's recovery policy, FEMA previously approved the program for the full 180 days from the date of declaration. Under the original approval, the program is scheduled to end with the last night of stay on March the 26th, 2025, and hotel checkouts on March the 27th, 2025. As of today's date, there are 2,763 individuals and families using this program. FEMA caseworkers continue to reach out multiple times to these families to identify interim housing solutions. Based on your request and because of the severity of the event, including winter weather affecting road closures, FEMA approves an additional 60 days to allow individuals and families more time to find alternative housing options. Based on the additional 60 days, FEMA approves the last night of stay on May the 25th and a checkout of May the 26th for the Transitional Shelter Assistance Program in North Carolina. This approval only pertains to the extension of TSAs in this program. All other conditions of the policy apply, and all policy waivers previously granted remain in place. This program is a short-term sheltering solution under temporary or permanent housing until those solutions are available. I look forward to continuing to partner with North Carolina on this recovery. Now, this letter was not sent by Deanne Criswell, the FEMA administrator. It was sent by Brett Howard, who is the federal coordinating officer for disaster recovery management at FEMA. However, now with the new administration in the Oval Office, there are, of course, expected to be some major changes in regards to some of these agencies like FEMA, who have received an incredible amount of criticism and scrutiny over the last couple of months, not only with hurricane relief in western North Carolina, similar issues taking place in portions of western Florida as they dealt with the impacts of Hurricane Milton, and now all eyes on portions of Southern California as they dealt with those devastating wildfires back a couple of weeks ago, and fires still even burning, some new fires even starting this morning due to some very strong Santa Ana winds in the southern portion of California. While I looked at the list of executive orders yesterday from President Trump, and there were a plethora of them, it's not immediately clear if any of those are set to have an immediate impact on hurricane relief. It has for Trump and his administration, they've only been in office at this point about 17 hours or so. So we'll have to wait on some of these changes. However, we'll be keeping a very close eye on that right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Couple of stories that we are going to be tracking over the next couple of days, as we already mentioned and brought to you yesterday morning. North Carolina homeowners expected to pay some big-time increases in their insurance rates over the next couple of years, an average of a 15% increase over the next 2 years, according to the State Insurance Commissioner Mike Causey. Plus, we are 1 week away from the North Carolina General Assembly gaveling back into session in Raleigh. This is set to be a very busy, long session for the GA. They will have to navigate a brand new governor in Josh Stein, the budget, as well as all of the other priorities of the still Republican-led General Assembly will likely come to the forefront over the next couple of months, and we'll keep you up to date with that gavel-to-gavel coverage of the GA, the issues affecting you in your day-to-day life. Well, that's going to do it for a Tuesday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. We're back tomorrow morning, 5 to 6, right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.